Dick Mater told me he used to run a little store in Cail, and his picture was in the Stars and Stripes of them apprehending the man who murdered her. He was living upstairs in an apartment over his store. This was the back door of his store, was in the Stars and Stripes.
I think my grandpa was arrested on.
Yeah?
Back when.
Bat Wittmer.
Well, I don't know about that. But he said he couldn't get the guy to believe him that was his store, but that's what he told him. And it really happened. What I have here is some pictures of the different types of Indian arrowheads. Now you can probably, if some of you are interested in some types, you can get Mark to make you a copy of these, and you can pursue your own collection, find out when they were made. It's not quite as simple as it seems, but it does tell you something. I'll pass these around. Well, pass it around. Arrowheads with it. The kids and I collected arrowheads in the 60s and the 70s. That was before the no-till situation came about. Fields were plowed, and when they were plowed and cultivated, you could find arrowheads. Of course, there's only so many, and when they're gone, they're gone. And then now they don't till the ground, don't plow the ground anymore, and it's very difficult to find any. These little arrowheads here, if you look at them, they're made for appearance. Most of the Indian arrowheads are made, they just hacked them out of any piece of flint they got. The style was characteristic of the Indians, but there was no attempt at appearance.
Hold them up, Val, so we can see it. We can't see them over here.
I'll pass it around.
Oh, they're little babies.
You have to see them close. They're two-toned, and these were sewn on the Indians' shirts when they buried them. And this little arrowhead right here, we speak of them as arrowheads, but this little white arrowhead with a sign on it is the only arrowhead I had out of 1,000 or more. Truly an arrowhead. These other larger, what we call arrowheads, are not arrowheads. They're spear points. And they were thrown by the Indians with what they call an addle hook, which was a stick about this long, and it had a little thing on the piece of bone there on the end, and they used pipe stems to these pipe stems. You cut you see them growing on the side of the road. The little hollow end of the pipe stems hidden in that, and they took it like this, and they threw it. And you could throw a spear very hard that way. You could throw something, a spear, a block that way, city block, all that. And they're quite forceful. And this here, if you look at it, is the size of the shaft. This is a deer horn that has been bored out to be used as an arrowhead by an Indian. And this gives you the idea of the shaft. And my finger would fit in the end of that thing. They couldn't shoot these large points. They had to be thrown. And like I say, this one here is the only one with an arrowhead. Then the white men hit this country in the 1600s, 1400s, and they made their arrows out of a little piece of sheet metal. They could make them. And they made a much better arrowhead, much sharper and easier to shoot. And from then on, when the Indians made their arrows, they mostly made sheet metal ones. And there was this short period of time when they really had arrows, like they always show them in the westerns. Of course, that was when the white men were here. These are, I'll pass these around here.
Leave them up here and we can all come up and look at them.
Well,
Oh, they're historic, yeah.
these things are bones. They were formed into tubes. This is part of a deer's shoulder here. This is part of a deer horn, part that's been cut off to use a point or something. This is an Indian tooth there. It's kind of interesting. The Indians, if you look at that tooth closely, you will see the top part, the tooth has roots down here in the top part, crown on it. That's worn down to like your knuckle. The Indians cooked with by heating stones. They didn't have any pots that stood to fire, pans they could use for a pan. They did have mud pots that they could store stuff in, but they couldn't use them for cooking. And all the stuff had to be, the meat had to be ground. Well, here's some of the bone stuff. And the meat had to be pounded. The berries had to be broken. When you have corn, you have to break the corn. If you eat corn seeds, well, they just pass on through you. There's no nourishment to it. So they had a stone they sat it on, they had another stone they hit it with. And they broke it into coarse meal and cooked it. All those things, the stones they heated and threw in there to keep it hot, because it was just a pot sitting there with water in it. Shed sand, sandstone around here. And all they were eating had sand in it, and their teeth wore down. They probably didn't live to be 20, 30 years old. And I found a lot of jawbones. I never saved any of them. But I never saw an Indian that had a decayed tooth. But their teeth are worn down into the quick, and the nerves. And I bet their teeth hurt them and all that. And here's some more of these arrows here are made for a little bit for appearance. They're called the Snyder Clan Hopwell Points, which is some of the later Indians. That's the Angel Mound group. And they had a place at St. Louis and on down the Mississippi River. They called them the Mississippians. And then they like talismanism, what do you call it? Something to look like something. They put the game that they wanted. This is made with a turkey tail. It's like the end of a turkey. This one here is a beaver tail. Another beaver tail. Another one, well, some hard to tell what some of them are.
Wow, good collection.
We took the kids out and gave them a nickel whenever they found an arrowhead. I've given them all the things that I kept track of them, put them in these things. These are from Kathleen's dad's jewelry store. When he went out of business, I kept those and used them to put the arrowheads in. And I had it on the back there if you want to see where they were found.
Where did you find them? Right here in the river?
Not far from.
Yeah, almost all around the river, yeah. And the Indians like to live around the river, particularly in where small creeks are. They could pull their canoes up into the creek. And then they went to the next highest ground around there. You can easily tell where Indians were if you know what you're looking for. Bud Scheidecker told me about it. That was the first I ever heard of it. That you could spot, if you look out across the field, you could see where the Indians were. Well, how you see it is, you look out there and there's a little hump in the field. Well, you think about it, the Indians were standing around in the wind, in the rain and bad weather. They weren't going to be standing in the swamp. They were going to be on the high spot. And you go over there and look, and if there's no broken stones around there burnt black and split, well, there wasn't any Indians there. And same with the creek mouths. On both sides of the creek, nearest the river, if there's high ground, that's where they were. Or they were out back a little on the hills, never in the low spots. Well, like I say, Mark, will you make them a copy of this stuff if anybody wants any?
Okay.
That's what I've got.
Yeah, I'm gonna see.
All that stuff is 500 to age, it goes up to 5,000 years. I met Glenn Black, there was a building up in Indiana University called Glenn Black Building. He was an Indian man, and I asked him what was the lower point of the Corn Island Mound, how old was that? And he said he had radiocarbon dated the lower section of that at 5,000 years.
I just wanted to say one thing out, my dad was born up where Deer Lake is, up in German Ridge. You go up 66 and where German Ridge Road turns off there, there used to be a little store. Across the road from there, my dad and another boy was hired to clear flint from that field because the Indians gathered there once a year. They brought flint down from Wyandotte Cave
Oh, yeah.
and made them. There were so many flints in there, they were dull plows. They were mobile plows pulled by mules. And so he pulled out flints and this other boy and put them in a bucket, took the bucket over and dumped it. And he said they had a huge mound. It's as big as a car or more. A flint they pulled out of that field and made a mound of it. And next year they'd call him back and the rain and the weather.
Will they get arrowheads or just flint?
It was both arrowheads and flints, but they were so common that they wouldn't keep them unless they were perfect.
Yeah.
So they just put them in a bucket and dumped them on the pile.
Well, they did have a procedure. There are places where they took their rocks, like you say, from Wyandotte Cave and split them. And that was a particular spot. Around here, when you pass the Y and you hit those tanks sitting there on the side of the road, well, that field, just this side of that is one of those fields. And there's little, you never find an arrowhead there.
Oh,
This was a workshop. They went there and they split that thing, and those little pieces coming off are sharp as a razor. They are sharp. And you gotta think, they were smart. You wouldn't want to do that around your campsite where you're walking barefoot. You'd want to have a place for it to do that, because you would have cut your feet every time you go by. That's what, there's one place after another. It's like that. Most of them don't have any arrowheads.
Well, I mentioned
Only got
broken ones.
No, not even, well, yeah, broken ones. Or these little splinters, split, splits off the other side. You get it to the grain, and you hit it, and you'll split off the chunk like that. About 1/16 of an inch thick. Full length, and sucker sharp on both edges. You shave it.
Dad's talking about that. But everywhere, around those, they've been dug through up there. All those cliffs up there all had flints and arrowheads.
For information, December the 1st and 2nd at the Sherby Center, Rick Pun here at the City Hall and a guy named Oleg, our Joe Gerber is going to exhibit his finds at the Sherby Center for 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. They're going to have like 100 tables. But anything that's come out of the ground, we're going to have everything from, naturally the theme is going to be prehistoric artifacts. December 1st and 2nd. And anything comes out of the ground, I'm going to be doing Civil War, and they're going to have bottles, props, jugs, marbles, anything that's been found out of the ground. And our Joel this is the first time he's ever have a presentation, so this will be big. It's gonna be free admission to the Shirley Center, December 1st and 2nd.
That'd be it.
Al, you don't set up a table if you got some stuff to sell.
Well, I don't have that much anymore. I've given them most away to the kids.
I can give her back.
You can adopt me.
I've got some items from the stuff from the Finns. And the first one, I'll pass this around. It's a calling card for the Chairmakers Union. So Chairmakers Union became a chair factory in what, 24?
1920.
1920. Yeah, so it's, you know, somewhere around 100 years old. It's A. Pauls was the superintendent, and that was his calling card. And then I have a couple of stock certificates, and the first one here is from the Mining and Manufacturing Company of Cail City, which I have seen something on before, but I don't know anything about it. I don't know if anybody knows anything about the mining.
All I ever
and
see is
manufacturing.
those certificates. I never see any pictures of it. Just those certificates. Al, you remember?
What's that?
Mining and Manufacturing Company of Cail City.
Never heard of it.
The date on the stock certificate is 1889.
Well, that's about Hauenstein.
Yeah. Al was 10 years old.
Morgan Schreiber was secretary and Charles Steinhauer was president. This is pretty good shape, so I'll
That is good.
pass that one around.
What if it's worth anything? Got a seal.
$2.
Well, look at that, it's got
Then we have this one,
costs down there.
which is for the Columbia Tobacco Company
Good stuff, Stan.
of Cail City. Now, I knew that there used to be a place in Cail City where they made cigars, if I understand it. I don't know if that was the Columbia Tobacco Company.
The lady's name was, that made the cigar was in back of where the old post office was.
Yeah, it's on the old blank building.
Yeah.
Something wasn't
And
double dip.
I thought she was her name, but there were several cigar makers in the city.
That's right.
You know, after 1858.
Yeah, you get a copy.
This was in 1904, so just barely over 100 years ago. And Norman Patrick was president, and Henry Steert was the secretary. This one's pretty fragile, so I'm going to leave this up here if anybody wants to come up and look at it. But it was the Columbia Tobacco Company. And also in here was a book that I didn't pay too much attention. It says the American Camel Coal Company on it. Lo and behold, it's not really what it is. It's just who owned it. But this book is the
It's gonna be 1840s, 1850s.
This is the revised statutes of the state of Indiana. And this is from 1852. And I thought, I don't know why this caught my eye, but this was rather interesting, so I thought I'd read this to you. This is Article 8 concerning Negroes and mulattoes. Section 1. No Negro or mulatto shall come into or settle in the state after the adoption of this Constitution. So after 1852, Negroes or mulattoes were not allowed to move to Indiana, and well, they were allowed to even come through. It was a free state, but blacks were not obviously welcome. Now, all contacts made with any Negro or mulatto coming into the state, contrary to the provisions of the foregoing section, shall be void. I don't really know, all contracts, not contacts. So if you have a contract, it becomes void. And any person who shall employ such a Negro or mulatto, or otherwise encourage him to remain in the state, shall be fined a sum not less than $10, not more than $500. This is 1852. All fines which may be collected for a violation of the provisions of this article, or of any law which may hereafter be passed for the purpose of carrying the same into execution shall be set apart and appropriated for the colonization of such Negroes and mulattoes and their descendants as may be in the state at the adoption of this Constitution and may be willing to immigrate. The General Assembly shall pass laws to carry out the provisions of this article. Now, I read it here somewhere else, that if you were already a resident of the state of Indiana, that you could go to the county courthouse and register. And, you know, if you were already a resident, they weren't going to kick you out. But you had to go to the county courthouse and register so that it was on the record books that you were a legal Negro in the state of Indiana.
Grandfather.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that still our Constitution? They haven't made one since 1852, have they?
You what?
Indiana's Constitution that we're currently under is 1852, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure this has been stricken.
Well, yeah. Amended. It's against the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments.
And, yeah, this is the 1852.
But back then, before the 14th Amendment, Indiana could pass laws that were in opposition to the federal Constitution. It only prohibited the federal government from certain things. After the 14th Amendment, the states were included too. And so after that, there wouldn't be need for that. But I think that's a pretty neat thing we've got. Because that was about the time that Hauenstein Smith and some of those people really had some influence were active in Hauenstein with getting the mill and so forth. Kind of interesting to know who really owned that.
Yeah, well,
They worked in on this, they probably pretty good stuff.
The American Canal.
yeah.
Was that Count or Tell City?
That was Hauenstein Smith too. He got coal company started, then he tried to get the mill started.
And Hamilton Smith's name is not showing here, but there were a couple other books, and his name is written in one of them. I think that's a one on Illinois, and it talks about the coal deposits and things like that.
Supposedly, according to my cousin, Mike Rutherford, Hauenstein Smith had a library of over 5,000 volumes at his home, one of the more literate people in the state of Indiana at that time. Of course, he spent a lot of time in Washington and was very well connected. And I think his house was somewhere around where Adam Street and Tex Clay, or somebody tore down, that's where it is. But he died in Washington. But he was basically the founder of the county. I think, when the first.
Tell City had their own rules about the blacks here, they called it. And you had till sundown, and I don't know just what years they were, but you had to be in your house or else go to Kentucky.
Henry that worked for Dr. James, got on the ferry every night, went back to Kentucky.
Yes, so we had our own rules.
They called blue balls, weren't they? Wasn't that the
I'm sorry?
blue ball? Were they blue balls?
It was just Chelsea City law. And the mulattoes were half white and half black, so that's what the mulattoes were. They either had a white mother or a white father.
Okay, Jeannie has something, so.
How about, see, I brought something with the understanding if nobody brought anything, I'd have something. It's so piddly that I think we should save it for next time.
Well, go ahead.
That's good. Barb
You have
has
the
something
floor.
too here yet.
Oh, okay. Sherry's got something. Okay.
Oh, my, see? No, I just picked up a few odds and ends around the house real quick. This is nothing historic, except it's very old, and it was just a little toy doll chest that my mother played with as a little girl. I don't know when it was made or where it was made, but it's just kind of unique. It's something that I like to have sitting around.
Was he,
Yes.
lived in Tell City?
No, she did not. She was in Sullivan County.
That's not a sales.
Well, you know, it could be. I wondered about that.
Not a what?
Salesman sample when they went around.
Well, usually, everybody I know that worked at
Furniture,
furniture
yeah, had things like
has
this.
something.
Very well could be. I don't know exactly what she got. And this is a corn cob pipe, which you've all heard of. You can see the corn cob. It's very evident, and it's just a cane stem. I don't really think it was used, although there appear to be some teeth marks on the underneath side, so they're not mine. So yeah, I gave up smoking. So.
That is valid, it's spoken.
This came from my grandfather. It was one of his tools that he had, and I believe, you know, it's got a little fork like to pull out nails on the end. So it tacks, so I assume something for a cobbler, shoe repair. I don't know. And the only reason I kept this around, it's very ornate. It's not something new. The technology is, if you unscrew the handle, it's not that long, but there. You have all the parts for various kinds of screwdrivers inside. So it's very old. So that idea has gone through the ages. It's very ornate. Yeah, I can pass this around and let people take a look at it, and it's a little heavy. You wouldn't think that a screwdriver this size would weigh quite what this weighs. So that's all.
Okay, Barbara, you're up.
I have a story similar to Chris's, but when I moved into a house in 1992 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I found in the papers that there were the actual blueprints made from the house, which was built in 1950, and it was down to like how they mixed the concrete, the actual recipe they used and everything. But when I looked at some other papers, they had some things for toasters and everything that they'd saved, you know, from the appliances. I got this little tag that says Barbara's chair. And that she was the girl, one of the girls that grew up in the house. And if I'm not mistaken, she got this in 1964, the same year I graduated from high school. And what it is a tag off of a Tell City chair, little rocker. And the logo or the slogan at the time was "Good chairs are expressions of good living. $8.95." No, it's a real rocker for a kid. And like I said, her name was Barbara. And I'm pretty sure her middle name was the same as mine. And I thought that was really eerie that I would find this.
In a house you moved in Minnesota.
Yeah.
It's a sheriff's office. You can't tell.
So I had to keep it.
Yes.
Does anybody else have anything? I've got one last thing, well, two last things. Over the last year when the chair company was, Doug and I was cleaning out the factory, he gave me a lot of the archives of the company, knowing that I'll preserve them and take care of them. And a lot of them are negatives of the furniture that was taken, the actual pictures they were used for catalogs, promotions, ads. And in one of them, I was going through them, I found several really neat ones, even from Jackie Kennedy. Original negatives that they taken of her sitting in the White House chairs and things like that. Some really cool stuff that they use for advertising. But in one of them, I have one of those giant Boston rockers like we have downstairs. And I've never even seen this in an ad, but it shows you like a miniature pony or a donkey or a horse or something in one of the rockers. If you would take this out and flip it up, and you can actually maybe see it from the other side, I got fingerprints on it, but it shows a man even holding it, but they blacked out the rest of it. That's kind of the old time. So I have those two to pass around, which they're kind of identical, just maybe a different pose or they have more than one. But, and one last thing, on a Tell City chair thing, you won't see many of these around. Tell City chair made these here. They are a decorative accessory. They just called it a wall plaque, but most of us call it the duck wall plaque because it's a duck. It's got a oak veneer back with a maple duck cut out in it, and it's 3135's pattern number on it. These are a pretty rare item, and one time at auction these would bring about $1,000. Just for this one, $1,000. Now you can pick them up 600 to 800. A little cheaper, but they're a rare piece. I'll pass it around. Just don't scratch
Is that Tell City Chair?
Tell City Chair made these, yes. So
I'm not,
Here, she doesn't have
she's got a
two
limit.
arms.
I don't have.
That's heavy.
Oh.
yeah. So I just want to show everybody. So if you see those, please bring them by. I'd be happy to buy them. I won't give you $600 to $800. I'll do you good. I won't give you that much.
Can you imagine?
At what time?
That was made probably 1957. Or no, 1967. Excuse me. 67.
Well, now they're selling for that.
Yes.
Can you hold that?
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. If nobody else has anything else to share, our next meeting is the October 22nd. The program will be the current and former elected officials. So we're going to really have this room full of a lot of BS if we're going to have all these politicians in here. It's going to be deep, so wear your boots. So, elected officials, previous ones and current elected officials. Let's talk about the city and how things work during their terms. Former mayors, former city councilmen, whoever we get. So hopefully we can get a lot of them in here and hope there's no fight between them.
Is that just city or Perry County? Just city?
Probably just city, but it doesn't matter.